Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 29th episode of Coby's Brain. We're going to get started with the 2021 film by director Wes Anderson, The French Dispatch, which I recently saw in theaters. The French Dispatch is the latest film by contemporary auteur Wes Anderson and is about a fictionalized version of the magazine The New Yorker called The French Dispatch. The film is artfully crafted in Wes Anderson's typical style and is basically the film equivalent of a New Yorker issue or just kind of any of those types of periodicals with a bunch of essays and that kind of thing. Basically, each article is kind of an unrelated story, and these are basically essays. And it features an incredible ensemble cast, which includes countless stars from Timothée Chalamet to Bill Murray to Tilda Swinton to Benicio del Toro. So many stars in this film. If you like stars, you'll probably like this movie a lot. Some of the stories, though, were a lot more entertaining than others. I really liked there was this one story about an artist in jail named Moses Rosenthaler, but I kind of found the other ones to be not as good, and that was kind of the first main one, so it was kind of downhill from that story, but nonetheless, it was still a pretty good movie. Ultimately, this film is a great contribution to Wes Anderson's unique canon of films that are both beautifully crafted and amusing. If you like The New Yorker, you'll love this movie. We liked it here on Coby's Brain. We're giving it an 8.1 out of 10. Silver Coby coin for Wes Anderson's latest film. Up next, we have the 2021 film directed by Chloe Zhao that I recently saw in theaters, Eternals. Eternals tells the story of a group of immortal alien superheroes known as the Eternals who come to Earth about 7,000 years ago in order to move humanity forward, kind of to give us some tips, and protect them from the dangerous deviants. I found Eternals to be one of the most philosophically ambitious Marvel films to date, which I like. It explained the cosmology of the MCU in much greater detail than I've ever seen before and gave a grander purpose of humanity, which is basically to expand and create celestial beings that will come out of Earth that will further expand the universe. The celestial Arishem is a fascinating character who is sure to add a new level of depth to the MCU. I'm stoked to see that dude again. That dude, this giant robot guy, giant god guy, absolute badass. The Eternals desire to save humanity despite their flaws, and that's kind of a fascinating testament to our value. And it's good to see. I personally am a moral absolutist rather than a utilitarian, and that's just what Marvel movies are all about. The bad guy is always utilitarianism, and it's good to see utilitarianism not winning out. The ends do not justify the means to the Marvel superhero, as I frequently talk about in my Marvel-related rants. The story was certain. So there's a lot of critics who hated it. But I can see where they're coming from in saying that the story was a bit much. And the ensemble cast, which were these absolutely amazing, Angelina Jolie, Salma Hayek, Kumail Nanjiani, all these amazing characters who were kind of underdeveloped, but they're going to be in more movies. What do you want? It was one movie. So I'm positive that we'll have plenty of opportunities to get to know these great characters in the near future. Ultimately, I found this movie to be fascinating and incredibly entertaining, despite what those critics had to say. I look forward to the MCU's inclusion of the Eternals and the Celestials like RSM, and also Kit Harington as Black Knight and Harry Styles as Star Fox in future movies. We really liked Eternals on Coby's brain. We're giving the latest Marvel movie an 8.4 out of 10. Another silver Coby coin for Marvel. Next up, we have the 1977 film directed by Woody Allen, Annie Hall. Annie Hall is a movie about a neurotic comedian named Alvy Singer, played by Woody Allen, delving into some of the reasons that his relationship with his ex-girlfriend, Annie Hall, played by Diane Keaton, failed. This film is incredible for numerous reasons. It is hilarious. It is clever. It has a number of really thought-provoking, philosophical, and psychological pieces of dialogue. There's so much to unpack in this movie. It's so interesting, so relatable. And I think as long as humans are around, I'm sure they'll be able to relate to Alvy and Annie's relationship in the movie. There was also a lot of other great aspects to the movie, like depiction of Los Angeles, which is a pretty interesting place, and Jewish identity as well. The film's narrative style is incredible and very unique. Alvy Singer, though, is somewhat of an insufferable character, but that's kind of his persona, I guess, and also a big part of what makes the film so funny. He reminds me of a slightly more annoying Larry David. Ultimately, I loved this movie, and I think I could watch it 100 more times without being bored because of how funny and thought-provoking regarding relationships it was. It's such a classic romantic comedy that I'm sure was super influential, and anyone who has ever been in a relationship will relate to it on a deep level. I'm not surprised that this film managed to beat out Star Wars for the best picture at the Oscars in 1977. We love this movie here on Coby's Brain a lot. We're giving it a 9.3 out of 10. That is a gold Coby coin for Annie Hall. Congratulations. Next up, we have the 2014 film directed by Michael Cuesta, Kill the Messenger. Kill the Messenger is a film about journalist Gary Webb, who in 1996 reported on the connection between the CIA-backed Nicaraguan Contras and the crack epidemic of the 1980s. The film is definitely entertaining, super engaging, and Jeremy Renner is pretty good. I like him. However, the film is obviously super controversial kind of because of the claims it makes, and obviously it takes the side of the person it's about, which is Gary Webb. And basically, within this real story, his reputation, and also in the movie, his reputation was totally tarnished. But the movie obviously kind of makes the case that tarnishing of his reputation was unjustified. And this claim is pretty difficult to assess. We just don't really know. While it's certainly true that the Contras were supported by the CIA, it remains unclear that the CIA was aware of their drug-dealing activities, let alone the resultant claims that went as far as saying the CIA intentionally addicted urban communities to crack. And I don't know. The reality is that this story the film is trying to tell is kind of a little more complicated than the film lets on, and I think could have benefited from some more ambiguity. Ultimately, the film probably oversimplified this really complex question of what happened between the Contras and the CIA and the CIA's role in the crack epidemic as a result. It was pretty entertaining, but I think it could have just approached the topic with a higher degree of nuance just because we're just not totally certain what went down. And I really hope one day we can get a conclusive answer on how complicit the CIA was in terms of permitting Contra cocaine, and also, arguably more important, also very importantly, just how much of an impact this specific drug source, that source being the Contras, had on the crack epidemic of the 80s. Very tragic situation in a lot of ways, and I think this movie could have approached the topic with, slightly more nuance. Anyways, we didn't love the movie that much on Coby's Brain, and we're giving it a 7.2 out of 10. Unfortunately, a wooden Coby coin for Kill the Messenger. Next up, we have the 2002 film directed by Charles Stone III, Paid in Full. Paid in Full is a movie based on a true story, the true story of A.Z. Faison, an 80s Harlem cocaine distributor, and kind of chronicles his rise and fall alongside his partners in crime. The film is an intense cautionary tale of the dangers of dealing cocaine, especially in the backdrop of the 80s, the early years of the crack epidemic. It has some interesting commentary on the nature of working in that particular business. According to its characters, no matter how much you love the game, it doesn't love you back. So if you're thinking of going into the coke business, Paid in Full would likely caution you against doing so. I think the film maybe could have benefited a bit more from actually kind of depicting the social consequences of these characters fueling the crack epidemic. However, the consequences the characters faced were certainly severe. Very Scarfacey. Ultimately, this movie is super engaging and very entertaining to watch, and it's a pretty extreme rise and fall story. And we liked it on Coby's Brain. We're giving it a 7.9 out of 10, a bronze Coby coin for Paid in Full. Next up, we have the 2015 film directed by F. Gary Gray, Straight Outta Compton. Straight Outta Compton is a biopic of the Compton-based gangster rap group that rose to prominence in the late 80s, NWA. As a fan of hip-hop, I loved this movie so much. Whenever I watch it, the musical performances always give me the goosebumps, and I can't look away for the full 2.5 hours. It's so great. The significance of NWA in terms of gangster rap, helping to define contemporary hip-hop, cannot be understated, and anyone interested in hip-hop will probably love this film. It was super well done, creatively shot, and a great time to watch. Story is a little overly ambitious at times, and although the group's origins are described in really good detail, the 90s are kind of glossed over a little too quickly. It's interesting also to note that Dr. Dre's history of violence against women is entirely omitted from the film, and the film definitely doesn't pass the Bechdel test. Definitely not, but so that kind of detracted from the rating that it's going to receive. Ultimately, this film is one of my favorite biopics ever and will blow the mind of any hip-hop fan out there. I love watching Straight Outta Compton. We're giving this movie an 8.7 out of 10. That is a silver Coby coin for Straight Outta Compton. That's a great rating. Next up, we have the 2010 book by Darren Hardy, The Compound Effect. The Compound Effect is a self-help book based around the premise that, like money, seemingly small, insignificant decisions we make on a daily basis compound and have a huge impact on your life. And as someone frequently trying to improve myself, I really love these self-help books. I gobble them up like candy. Insights from this book include the value of consistently acting upon good habits, that huge rewards are reaped over time from small, smart choices, and these choices are often so subtle they're imperceptible. The fundamental formula of the book, which is that small, smart choices plus consistency plus time equals radical difference. Also, the importance of tracking habits, the importance of clearly defining your goals, the power of momentum in terms of moving yourself forward when you're kind of on a good streak, and also being highly critical of those that you surround yourself with because of the enormous power of influences on these small decisions you'll make, never quitting, and also going above and beyond all the time. Unlike other more psychology-based self-help books, this one is mostly the author kind of backing up his claims with anecdotes and inspirational rhetoric. It's more pathos than logos, and as a result, not that much ethos, but a great deal due to he's a pretty successful dude, and it's a good book. It's a good book. Ultimately, this book is definitely entertaining and inspirational, but if you're looking for more practical advice on how to implement the changes the book says are going to be really good for you, I'd read Atomic Habits. Nonetheless, we like this book here on Coby's Brain. We're giving The Compound Effect a 7.8 out of 10. That is a bronze Coby coin. Next up, we have Junkie, Confessions of an Unredeemed Drug Addict, a 1953 book by William S. Burroughs. Junkie is a novel by and about famous Beat Generation author William S. Burroughs and his experiences as a heroin addict living in various cities, including New York and Mexico City. The book is super interesting as both a voyeuristic look into the life of a junk user, as well as being a significant work in the canon of the Beat Generation, which was a group of authors whose impact on American counterculture and kind of as a result, culture as a whole, has long interested me and which is pretty fascinating ultimately. Although the book is somewhat of a cautionary tale against becoming a heroin addict, it's not that much of one, which is kind of strange. I actually got into this book because I was learning about Basquiat, and this was kind of one of Basquiat's favorite books that kind of glamorized in some ways the heroin addict lifestyle, which just doesn't really have a good outcome for anyone. So maybe if you're at all considering becoming a heroin addict, which you probably shouldn't, this book will probably not move you in the right direction. But who knows? Whatever. That's if this controversial aspect of the book wasn't the case, it probably wouldn't be such a significant Beat Generation piece of literature. Ultimately, the book is a really interesting look into a post-World War II. The book is a really interesting look into post-World War II America through the lens of a fringe member of society and really interesting look at a significant figure in the Beat Generation of American writers. We liked this book on Coby's Brain. It was super entertaining. We gave it an 8.3 out of 10. That's a silver Coby coin for Junkie. Next up, we are transitioning into Coby's music blog. We're going to start with the October 2021 album from Young Thug, Punk. Punk is the latest album from one of rap's most prolific and creative artists, Young Thug. Bangers include Stressed Out featuring J. Cole and T-Shine, Living It Up with Post Malone and A$AP Rocky, Insure My Wrist with Gunna, Icy Hot with Doja Cat, and my personal favorite, Hate the Game. I liked Young Thug's experimentation in this album, but sometimes it just didn't really do it for me. Nonetheless, I liked it. The album is yet another experimental project from the always innovative Young Thug, and I really liked it, especially Hate the Game. On Coby's Brain, we are giving Thug's latest project an 8.2 out of 10. That is a silver Coby coin for Young Thug. Keep doing what you're doing. Okay, now we are transitioning into Coby's Thought Blog, where we're going to be talking about something I've been looking forward to talking about for a while. My thoughts have kind of been marinating on it for the past few weeks, which is going to be a thought entitled Appreciation for the Blockbuster Age of Cinema. So that's what it is. It's me kind of expressing some admiration for the blockbuster age and responding to a lot of the arguments against it. So, critics and historians often hate on the blockbuster age. They argue it's entirely profit-driven and sacrifices quality storytelling for high-concept franchises that solely exist to make money for the major studios. This is true to an extent, but I, along with a lot of other movie consumers out there, love the cinema of the blockbuster age. I still love all cinema from early years of silent film onwards. However, my appreciation for it undoubtedly extends into the cinema of today for a number of reasons. And those reasons are, number one, I would make the case that mere visual spectacle, which is something that people hate on the blockbuster age for because they say that that's all there is to these movies. But the mere visual spectacle, particularly that of the blockbuster age, is in fact a legitimate art form that shouldn't be dismissed by film snobs. Two, the world building of massive franchises has yielded some incredible stories that are deserving of the viewership of such film snobs who entirely dismiss film franchises without ever viewing them or getting into them at all. Three, the blockbuster age is the beginning of inclusive, diverse storytelling in cinema that was absent in previous generations of Hollywood. 4, thanks to the streaming age, which coincides with the blockbuster age, both of which are kind of taking place right now, the blockbuster age will not mean fewer of the more realistic non-franchise movies that film snobs believe that the blockbuster age has wiped out. So, point 1, regarding the artistry of visual spectacle, comes in response to the comments of Martin Scorsese a couple years back when he claimed that Marvel movies, which are totally the epitome of the blockbuster age, if you ask me, or ask pretty much anyone, that these movies are not cinema. To him, they do not sufficiently, well, this is kind of what he said, they don't sufficiently engage us on an emotional level, and what he says is, it isn't the cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being. So that's an interesting argument, obviously, and I think there's not no credibility to it, obviously. But in point 2, I kind of make the case that franchises offer massive world building and deeply emotional stories for that even film snobs that dismiss the films without even watching them kind of don't give credit to. Had Scorsese taken the time to actually see Avengers Endgame or Black Panther, I believe he might not have made the claims that he ended up making. However, it's obviously difficult to get a film snob to even engage with this material on a surface level. And film snob, obviously that has a super negative connotation. Just people who are big time appreciators of film in its earlier forms than today. So we'll give it to him. Let's for the sake of argument, let's say that these critics or these film snobs who have never even watched a Marvel movie are right, and these movies don't actually provide any substantive emotional value, which, according to my second point, isn't true. Nonetheless, the definition of cinema isn't stories that provide emotional, psychological experience like Scorsese says. And that's because before moving pictures were a storytelling medium, they were solely based upon spectacle. The earliest films would show a train arriving at a train station or a baby laughing, and this was known as the cinema of attractions. My point here is that cinema of attractions preceded narrative cinema, which is what Scorsese equates to cinema in general. Now, let's say Marvel movies are just amusement park rides meant to visually engage audiences and nothing more at all. That doesn't mean they aren't still cinema, but regardless, so based on the cinema of attractions, these would still qualify as cinema. But this point is a matter of semantics, but gets to the deeper point of the artistic value inherent within visual spectacle that served as the basis of cinema as an art form. So all of the progress made in visual effects and animation, that is movement forward, I would argue. But Film snobs probably would not. I would argue, yes, there is aesthetic merit to visual effects and animation. Am I biased here? Probably, considering I animate. Yes, I animate, but look at this. This is kind of cool, right? Is there no artistic merit to what you're watching right now? I don't know. I think there is. I think that I, the brain, am beautiful. Regardless, back to the points I'm making. With regards to point 3, it would not be difficult to argue that prior to recent years, cinema was totally just a kind of a white man's medium. For decades, this has been a critique of Hollywood that had not begun to be fully addressed until the blockbuster age. Although we are not fully there, advancements in minority representation on screen that has taken place during the blockbuster age is another virtue of recent cinema. Dismissing contemporary cinema would negate the works of these diverse filmmakers who have drastically moved cinema in a direction that is far more representative of humanity as a whole. Now, to discuss point 4, the blockbuster age significantly coincides to what I refer to as the streaming age, when cinema ceased to be a medium reserved for the movie theater and fully moved into the households of all consumers. In the streaming age, watching a movie or TV show at home has become a legitimate cinematic experience. One of the many results of the streaming age has been the proliferation of all types of content, much of which lacks the visual effects and high concept relation to a franchise that film snobs dislike so much. As a result, this film snob beef with the blockbuster age that these classic films are no longer produced isn't really true. We live in an age where the creation of typical blockbuster content does not result in less realistic story-driven content being made. It's all being made now in the streaming age. So everyone should maybe just be happy. So one can shake their fist all they'd like at the prioritization of attention-grabbing visuals in movie theaters by studios seeking to bring an increasingly distracted, screen-inundated base of consumers in. However, doing so will simply distract one from the reality, which is overwhelmingly positive for everyone. Hollywood is currently creating content for everyone to enjoy, regardless of your subjective aesthetic preferences. I stress subjective. While the advancements of the visual art component of cinema has been advancing rapidly, so too has the ability of filmmakers to tell stories that engage us at an emotional and psychological level. So one can bemoan contemporary cinema all they want, just like art snobs have done during every artistic movement in history. But just like all these other movements, human expression is simply progressing forward. So as a result, I love the blockbuster age and am sure, and those of you who also love it are not fools. We are not fools. Okay, that's our episode for today. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Coby's Brain, and we will see you next time.